We talk about some magazines just out. We go Wafer thin with cinematographer Pete DeVries, and the search is on for the missing E.T. game. All this coming up in A Girl and a Gun.
A Girl and a Gun, Episode 10, recorded the 6th of June 2013. Wafer thin.
All you need to make a movie is a girl and a gun. Come along and join the party while we stare at the sun.
Hello, welcome to A Girl and a Gun, the show for filmmakers and content creators. I am Phil Moore, and as always, I'm joined by John Maisels.
Hello, Phil. Hello, everybody.
Hello. You're reading something. You've got a magazine
look,
there.
Just before I came
How
out
convenient.
to the studio, yes, I got mail dropped with like 3 different magazines. So this one, firstly, Content and Technology. They're doing a cover story on Media Hub. But look, I've got to show you this. You know how we've been talking about these strange camera things? Well, there's a strange camera thing. Anyway, you can read about that probably from the Content and Technology website. So let's get rid of that.
You've got others ones here.
Yeah, another one that came in today. So this is the August, I guess, issue of July.
PC Tech Authority.
Yeah, PC and Tech Authority. And they do, they're doing a very interesting article on how to make your TV smarter. So smart TVs.
Yeah.
All the story.
We're talking 4K Ultra HD there?
You're just talking about a smart TV. So you're just talking about something that not only shows you pictures, but also interacts with you via the web and everything else. So this is like the 3-screen model compressed into one screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's that. And of course, the SMPTE Journal. Got to love this. The Journal of Motion Imaging from the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. And I am just waiting to read this story here on the new high efficiency video coding standard. So we've gone MPEG 2. Actually, we've gone MPEG 1.
Yeah.
Then we've gone MPEG 2, which improved the performance quite a lot. Then we went H.264.
Which is MPEG 4.
Well,
it's a version
they called it MPEG 4 and it came out of the same work, but in fact it's a further development. So it's not really the thing that they started off calling MPEG 4, which was a follow-on to the conferencing standard H.261.
Yeah.
And you really wanted to know that, didn't you?
There's an H.265 on the way as well.
Yeah, well, this is what's currently called the high efficiency video coding standard, HEVC, and the article tells you a little bit about how that works and why it's going to be better. And each time we go through one of these things, the coding gets significantly better, so we get much better pictures in fewer bits. The reason that's important is because we also increase the resolution that we want.
And this is why 4K, you need this sort of stuff.
Yeah, so we've gone from standard def to high def to now ultra high def.
High def, yeah.
Which is 4K, and eventually we're going to go to ultra high def, which is the 8K that...
So where can anyone wants to see the SMPTE mag in particular, where would you get that?
What, you go to the SMPTE website and you join.
You got to join?
Oh yeah, it's easy.
Okay, you're spruiking now for SMPTE.
Sorry.
I think it's time we got on to the breaking news of the week. Now, not too many stories this week because we have a special guest coming up. But the first one...
Well, we're opening this week with Tropfest. Now, Tropfest in the past had a content agreement with Movie One, the movie channels. The movie channels disappeared as a result of a reorganisation of channels at Foxtel, so there were no movie channels there. Tropfest is now moving to SBS2, and David Tiley on Screen Hub just has a wonderful way with words, and he's had a wonderful way with these. The Clutches. David, The Clutches.
Oh, well.
Away from.
It was shown on SBS 1 last year, I think,
yeah.
but now 2's got it.
But this is going to actually be a quite good thing for Tropfest, because SBS 2, as part of the arrangement, are going to have 13 weeks of run-up programming associated with Tropfest before the event, and then they'll carry everything. So it's still basically Tropfest open to everybody, and the distribution will be essentially free.
Well, it's now on a free-to-air channel.
And it's a free-to-air channel, which means it picks up the other 70% of homes that don't have pay TV.
All right, if you want to watch Tropfest, SBS 2 this year.
Yep.
The next one you wanted to do as well, Sydney Underground Film Festival.
No, I was going to leave that for you.
Were you? Okay, well, I will do it.
Yeah.
The Sydney Underground Film Festival is open for entries. They close 28th of June. So as we record this, just a couple of weeks left. If you want to get an entry into the Sydney Underground Film Festival, just letting you know. The Sydney Film Festival itself, the main festival, has started this week, in fact. And I know some of our students are going along to that. I've tried entering a couple of things into this, haven't got one in yet.
You haven't made through the selection.
I haven't, but those who want to, 28th of June is the last date for entries for Sydney Underground Film Festival.
So I believe the next step is we will go and picket the Sydney Film Festival in order to get this program on the bill for next year.
I don't think they do podcasting.
No.
Also, in the hub, this actually comes from Cartoon Brew, there's a cartoon show called Shizao.
Shizao.
Now, this is just appearing on the hub, but apparently it's been showing on Australian TV for a year or so, a couple of years. This features a 12-year-old boy named Guy Handon who inherits a magic ring from his auntie and that turns him into a female superhero named Shizao. And all he has to do to become her is go, "You go, girl." That's what he has to say.
This is such a bizarre concept. I mean, like crossing gender lines. Tell me, Phil, did you ever secretly want to be able to turn yourself into a girl and then back again?
No, but I have as an actor, a confessional point here, I have as an actor been in a play and I played a drag queen.
So hang on, you're playing a drag queen and therefore, as the male playing the drag queen, had to dress up as
a drag,
as a
yes,
woman.
That was the character.
Yeah, but that's a different thing. This is actually, suddenly bang, and you turn
Well,
into a
this is
woman.
actually, this show is, it's obviously getting a lot of good rapport by the gay lesbian community. It's been on TV in Australia for a couple of years. It looks like, we've only got a still there of the graphic, we can't show you any video, but it looks like a fun show. I've never heard of it before.
Look, this is probably one of these things that, a bit like, name of show has gone straight out of my head, Big Love. So when the synopsis for Big Love, the guy who has 3 wives, and that all sounded very salacious. In fact, it was much more interesting than the synopsis suggested. And I guess this is probably the same thing. This is probably worth a look just to find out how they handle it.
The trick is the target audience here is not adults, they say. The target audience are young people, many of whom may be confused about their own sexuality.
So you could get away with anything.
Nope, great, all for it. Obviously, there are certain religious groups up in arms about it, but I'm all for it.
But in this studio, we are totally confused about our sexuality.
I'm not. Moving along.
Gives me
Mystery
nowhere
Road.
to go.
There's a film called Mystery Road which opens the Sydney Film Festival, which I mentioned this week. It's bypassing the established theatrical distributors. And there's always new ideas of how to get your film out there. These guys, Ivan Sen and producer David Goliath, writer-director Sen, they've decided to release this murder mystery on August 15th via Dark Matter. Now, this company is owned by Michael Wren. The rationale is if the film turns a profit, they go to the filmmakers, not the distributors. So they're bypassing the traditional distribution model, basically, thereby saving, they claim, 25 to 30%, which is what the distributor would charge. It's going to a small run of cinemas, like 15 to 20 screens. So it is getting a cinema distribution, but they're kind of handling this themselves. And that's just another way of doing it. So even that total freelance distribution is becoming, and for small films like this, it's really quite worthwhile.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Just another way of doing it. On that, actually, in fact, if we move into our next section, which is kind of crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, there is, in fact, a new Kickstarter project, a new Kickstarter-like project. So another crowdsourcing fund called Seed and Spark, and they've launched a crowdfunding site specifically for filmmakers. So Indiegogo, Kickstarter, there are filmmakers who've used those, and we've talked about some of those in the past. This group, Seed and Spark, is specifically for filmmakers. So the company differs from Kickstarter and Possible, which is an Australian version of this, because they claim they're run by filmmakers, for filmmakers, caters to a specific set of needs. You don't have to reach your full 100% of funding that you're after, as long as you get to 80%, and then you can maybe adjust your budget and work with that. So on Kickstarter, if you don't get 100%, you don't get anything. Here, if you get close enough, you can adjust and still do it. And I think they've got things in place for doing it in stages, because films can be expensive and you can have different levels of stages where you ask for funding. So if you're doing the Zach Braff thing, for example, have a look at these guys, Seed and Spark. One specifically for filmmakers for crowdfunding.
And next week we'll be reporting from Hollywood. Hope to be getting Zach Braff on the show just to talk about how well his crowdsourcing has worked.
Don't make promises we can't keep, John.
All right, I won't make promises.
You want to do this next one?
Game
of Thrones.
This is Game of Thrones, and so now the information is out on what it's actually costing to produce. So They reckon that Game of Thrones cost $60 million to produce for season 1, and that it went up about another 15% for the following season. But what is interesting is how much of the work that they've done off-site. So the film office for Game of Thrones is actually in Belfast, but they're also filming in Croatia and in Iceland. And why did they go to Iceland? Well, because it's actually cold enough there that you don't have to fake the breath in front of your face. And they're saying that, in fact, picking everything up and going and shooting in the place where it's actually cold and not having to fake that is significantly cheaper than putting it in as an effect later.
I like this. Coming to visual effects, in fact, there's a rather lengthy video here which is a seminar they did, and it talks about the production process and everything. And we've got this queued up. There's a bit here where they talk about the visual effects within the show. Let's show a bit of that now.
Those are our wolves that we shoot in Los Angeles months after we shoot the rest of the scene. We shoot them on a green stage. All of this is Croatia, and then we add on to create King's Landing. You know, this is a quarry in Croatia, and often what happens is you pick a location to make it into a visual effect, and the VFX guys look at it and they decide to just make it all 3D anyway.
Well, there you go.
Pixamundo does our dragons. They're extraordinarily successful, and we're very grateful to them for that work. So all of this is Northern Ireland, and we, obviously always look for locations where the foreground elements and some.
Okay, so we can see there, we're on? Okay, we can see there some of the visual effects. This is a great video. It talks about a lot of the production process, the locations, as you mentioned, all of this. And there's a lot of visual effects in this show.
Yeah.
And if you're not watching this, there's something wrong with you, frankly, after this week's episode. My God.
I'm not watching it.
Why not?
Because I've been, all my time is going to House of Cards.
Well, that's another great show which one should be watching indeed.
Or listening to, because the sound is just so fabulous.
Yes. Well, that comes to us again from Screen Hub. Have a look on the screenhub.com.au. VFX workflow, realising the impossible dream. There's a really good video there on the whole process of Game of Thrones. That's about half an hour long or 26 minutes long, that whole video. Take a look at it. 5.1 temp mixers in Star Trek Into Darkness. Yet another story about Star Trek
Yeah, well, this is a really, really interesting thing. So we've had a couple of stories now about the editing process that they've been using on Star Trek Into Darkness. And what they've done here is something a little unusual in that they've done the 5.1 mixers, or at least the temporary mixers, pretty early. So normally all this stuff happens towards the end of the process. You work with some sort of rough guide, then you go and you do all the audio adding later with all the effects and everything. In this case, they've been doing it the other way around. So they've been getting guide tracks, but 5.1 guide tracks, and editing to that, which has allowed the visual editors to go and craft what they are doing to the soundscape, rather than the other way around.
Very often, you're doing a visual cut, but there's a lot expected in the sound and the music, and you're sort of flying blind.
Yeah.
You can make a shot last longer if you know there's going to be a certain thing there. Well, they've got the assistant editors here actually doing a lot of this work, which is great. It gives them something much more practical to do, and they're in the final film. Their work.
The article is worth a read. Yes, as Phil says, a lot of these temporary mixes they've gone. Oh, in fact, that's what we want. They've cut to the temporary mixes and used that. Article worth a read, particularly if you're a sounder. It'll give you a good feeling.
This comes again from StudioDaily.com. Taking 5.1 temp mixes even farther. Star Trek Into Darkness. Check that one out. Okay, IP. We always have a couple of IP stories every week.
We have to have the IP story.
The Twilight series of movies.
Well, yeah. Twilight have been notorious about protecting their franchise. As well they might. It's been very successful for them, and they expect to make a very, very large amount of money about barely nubile females and their hangers-on running out looking at all these non-vampire-ish types. Well, there is now a parody that's coming along, and it's called Twi Harder. You guessed it. This is one of those parodies, a little bit like all the other parodies that we've seen, Friday the 12 and a half, or whatever those movies are. Now, given how litigious the studios could be, and particularly Lionsgate and Summit, who control what happens with Twilight, Twy Harder's New York-based lawyer has slapped a 219-page lawsuit down on Lionsgate.
Against Lions. But the interesting thing is, it's not an intellectual property suit, it's antitrust.
Yeah. And they're claiming that Lionsgate is controlling this to the extent that nobody's allowed to do anything, including make a parody.
So that's what Lionsgate said, you can't make a parody, you can't release that. And they're saying, and we've proven it's a parody. Why are you shutting us down because we happen to spoof your movie? That is antitrust. And so, no, it's a good avenue to take, I guess.
And generally speaking, people who do parodies, like Weird Al, just read about how Weird Al goes about doing his parodies, because he's possibly the most successful recorded comedy parodist. Is there any other sort of parodist of all time? But he always goes and gets permission to do the parodies. Invariably, the parody is good for both sides. It's good for the original work, and it's certainly good for Weird Al. So.
And we even find we talked about viral videos on YouTube. If anyone does a parody or comedy or rip-off of your thing, it's actually good for the original source too.
It's always good.
Okay, fine. Sue them over that. I think that's a valid suit.
So sue me.
There's another suit happening, again suing Disney and Jerry Bruckheimer over Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, I don't know if this one's a valid one, however. Someone is claiming that after all these years, the Pirates of the Caribbean movie franchise has stolen his ideas within the story of this thing.
How can you steal the ideas? What idea is there to steal?
Well, it was based originally on the ride at Disney World, you know. So in the file suit in the US District Court of Florida, Royce Matthew claims that Disney infringes on a story that Matthew had written and has fraudulently procured a settlement from him when the previous lawsuit was filed. So he's saying what they settled with me was not nearly good enough. I'm suing them again properly. It's a bit late for this, I reckon. I mean, really.
Well, the movie's really out there.
Well, how many are there now? 4?
Enough.
Yes.
Enough.
Anyway,
Enough for everybody to be wandering around going, "Arr."
As soon as you become successful in this, someone's going to find a way to sue you to try and get money out of you. I don't know, but this seems like another IP troll case, basically.
Look, basically, as soon as this program takes off, you know that I'm going to be out there suing Phil for everything he's got. I expect to get not much.
Not much at all. Well, let's finish with something a little bit happier. Do you remember the worst video game ever made?
The worst video game ever made, would this be the E.T. video game?
Yes. Famously, the worst thing ever made. They couldn't sell it. It basically killed the video game industry for several years. And famously, all of these cartridges that they could not sell were dumped in a landfill and covered up and forgotten about. It's become a myth.
In fact, if I remember rightly, the myth is that they were covered in concrete. So
Yes.
it's like the concrete shoes for video games.
Well, someone is now going to go back and try to dig these up and see if they actually are there, and they're going to make a documentary about the whole thing. So,
And what a great idea! They found the guy who did who ran the garbage concession that did the original dumping, and he said he knows where they are. So, this is a true story. Snopes says it's a true story. The people, I think, who own the site say it's not true. There's nothing there.
yeah, New Mexico landfill they claim it was in. It's become a big urban legend.
I'm predicting that when they find the games, they're also going to find a whole lot of episodes of Number 96 and most of Bellbird.
In New Mexico?
Who knows? It was in landfill somewhere.
Number 96 wasn't nearly as bad as this game. That's all the news we have this week. I want to move right along because we have our special guest coming up. But after we've done our next series in our tutorials of screenwriting with Karel Segers. Hello, welcome to our 4th in our series on screenwriting with Karel Segers. Hello, Karel.
Hi, Phil.
Now, last time we talked about
Goals?
for your character. Let's get a bit more nitty-gritty. I've heard it said that character is more important than plot, or plot is more important than character. What is it?
Yeah, when people tell me that they're not so much interested in, movies with lots of action and movement, but more about characters.
Art films.
Well, yeah, but when this person is a filmmaker or a screenwriter, then I go, okay, that means that they probably don't understand quite how it works. Because how do you get to show character? Tell me, how do you get to show character? But just have someone sit there? No, but have someone talk there and tell you about them? No, because you won't believe them, you won't trust them.
So how do we reveal character appropriately?
Through action, through what they do. When a character says something on the screen, you will naturally doubt that. You will mistrust that character. You will mistrust what they say. Because the essence of screen drama is that characters act in contradiction with what they say. You know, there's a subtle conflict, there's tension between what we see visually, what we hear. So
which is
called
subtext, which is going to
Exactly.
get to it a bit more detail later on.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So how do we learn about a character? Through what the character does. We call that actions. So when we say action, we don't necessarily mean violence or speed. It's just what a character does.
The stuff that they do.
Yeah, the
And that
behavior.
defines the plot, basically, then.
That defines the character. That defines
So what's
who they
plot,
are.
then?
Well, it's the same thing. That's the big con. When people try to teach you character, they're not. They're teaching how to write action that will reveal character, because there's no difference between the two types of film. You know, when you have a film that doesn't have character, you probably don't have the right action. That's just how it is. And then you have a lot of talky films, and you know, maybe Woody Allen's movies are slightly different. If you only have talk, then it's like you can switch the image off, because it's like radio.
But I would argue that you can still have a very talky scene, very verbose scene, but there's action in that talk. This is actually an acting technique.
Well, Woody Allen has proven himself wrong in that respect. He started his most successful movie with dialogue over black, and it was working just as well as the scenes that were visual. And it's Midnight in Paris. Midnight in Paris starts with dialogue over black, and is in no way different from all his other dialogue. Woody Allen is actually a radio maker. You haven't thought about that.
He's making radio drama.
You can
with pictures.
perfectly switch the image off. It's probably the most successful filmmaker among the blind.
Because you could also say the same of like Tarantino, who has some very long dialogue scenes in his films.
It's true, but I think there's a lot of action there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just because it's two people talking, like right now, there's a lot of action going on.
And the key scenes, the key moments in Tarantino's movies are visual. They're kinetic. There's movement, there's action.
And that's action.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the kind of action we're talking about here is basically a conflict of some kind.
What people do, what characters do, you know? You get to know someone by what they do, not by what they say. Because they'll say one thing and they'll do another. I mean, look at a failed marriage, you know?
So if character is defined by what they do, by the actions that they take, and that basically is your plot, you're saying there's no difference really.
There's no difference. No difference.
So plot is simply character. Character is plot.
Yeah, it's true.
So is not plot the sequence of actions over the course of your story?
That's right. But in order to show how a character changes or develops, you need to lay out that action in a particular way, in a meaningful way, right?
Which is their goal.
That's right, exactly. And that shows the importance of the goals. But what I'm saying is that in order to make that character credible and not random, there needs to be a certain logic, an emotional logic to what they do and how they do it and how it's laid out over your story. I usually use, unfortunately, in Australian film, as an example of a character we don't understand because the actions don't make sense. It is Somersault. Somersault is a beautiful film in terms of the way it was, executed. It was wonderfully photographed and great
Beautiful music score.
Wonderful and great performances. However, the actions of the main character don't make any sense.
I found when I saw that film, it's like, okay, I've never been a teenage girl, run away from home, so I can't relate. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to relate to her. And spoiler alert.
I've never been a serial killer, but I relate to a lot of serial killers.
The end of that film is like, why did she do all that when she just, she didn't fulfill a goal. There didn't seem to be a goal in that case.
But even
And that was a film, that's a film that went through a lot of writing development.
Yes.
It was highly praised for the New South Wales Film and Television Office, funding and everything that they went through, the screenwriting, what was it, the workshops that they had.
Yeah,
anyway. The Aurora workshops. And as you say, beautiful and well made in every other respect, but I must agree, I found it a boring film, I'm sorry.
But unfortunately, Phil, nobody really cares about our opinion, right? But the film didn't work. It was selected into a side section of the Cannes Film Festival, and here in Australia, then it went to Cannes, but it didn't go anywhere. People didn't see it. Outside Australia, where it was hyped more than any other film, no one went to see it, and those who did gave a very bad word of mouth. And it was just because of the actions didn't make sense. There was no logic. There was no emotional logic.
And there are
to the
other
actions.
examples in Australian films that are like this, that seem to fail, and people ask, why aren't they working?
Yeah.
And we would say, well,
It is because people don't understand that character equals plot. In order to show a character in a relatable way, in a way that people can understand, you need to put meaning in the succession, the events, the way a character acts.
actions that make sense for that character, that lead to a clearly defined goal for that character, and get that right, bang, you've got a plot,
and
you've got a story.
And that then will reveal who that character is. That will reveal the true character that we see on the screen, right? So only then does it make meaning and does it make sense at the end of the film.
So what would you say, just to finish up, what would you say about some of these big Hollywood blockbusters, which seem to be plot, 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 not much character, it's just action, 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 like physical action, that drives this story forward to defeating the Transformer robots or whatever it might be, and the characters are pretty immemorable.
Well, there are obviously there's a whole range of films that are thriving on the kinetic action, I'll call it. But the real breakthrough, or the ones that really break through the $1 billion mark, they're usually character-driven.
Like the Avengers.
As in, there the actions do make sense and reveal what these characters are about. Avengers, Dark Knight, Avatar.
Even the new Star Trek, which we talked about.
All the Pixar movies. These are blockbusters that break through the ceiling that the more kinetic action movies can't.
Because there's still character at the heart of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Despite all of
there
the
the
action.
actions show a change in the character.
Okay, so character is the most important thing. Character is plot, according to Karel.
Therefore, plot is just as important as character.
Thank you, Karel Segers. Join us next time in our next episode on this series of Screenwriting with Karel Segers. Welcome back to A Girl and a Gun. I am the main protagonist of this show, and my nemesis is John Maisels. And we are joined now by Pete DeVries.
Hello, Phil. How are you?
Hello. Pete DeVries, ACS. What does the ACS stand for?
You introduced me to this man.
I did. Well, you met John.
Oh, hello, Pete. You just. I'm John.
I remembered.
So you were watching. I'm so glad this program has ratings.
And it is so true what you say about Pirates of the Caribbean. That noise that you make, it just comes with the film, doesn't it? If you don't know that...
It's like Lifesavers, you have to do the sound effect.
Yeah, beautiful, yeah.
Have you met Veronica? This is
Hi,
Veronica.
Veronica, she's lost her sunglasses.
Oh, she has?
Yeah, never mind. Hi, Veronica.
Just bring up Pete's lower third there again, if you could, guys. Pete DeVries, ACS. What does the ACS stand for those who don't know?
The ACS is an industry accreditation, and it means Australian Cinematographers Society.
There we are.
And you have to submit work to the ACS, which is an industry-wide organisation which fosters the progress of cinematography in Australia back from the 1920s. It's a very old organisation. The organisation doesn't go back to the 1920s, but the organisation, the Australian Cinematographer Society, was an idea that came about in 1958, and it has been going ever since. It has something like 800 members around Australia. Cinematographers submit their work every couple of years. You're invited to submit work. It's judged by your peers from all around Australia, and they are also accredited members who look at your work and they say, well, we've looked at your body of work and we feel as though that is of a high enough standard to be given an ACS
So it's an
accreditation.
acknowledgement of
It's an
ability
acknowledgement.
and all of that.
Yeah,
It is,
Peter's
yeah.
being incredibly modest because anybody who gets to the standard of being an ACS has really significantly made it with a very large and prolific and important and highly valued body of work, and that's really what the letters signify at the end.
And just to avoid
that would be the equivalent of the ASC.
And
if
the
you
ASC
were-
is the American one.
It
yes.
is,
the American
yeah,
society.
Yeah. It's very highly respected.
Every
around
country,
the world.
most countries have one, yeah.
Yeah, that's BSc, ACS,
Yes.
ASC.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's very prized. It's actually quite, it's very hard to get.
Yeah.
I was accredited about 1985. But I feel as though if
It was
I
a bit
was,
easier back then, you think?
I think it was. I think if I submitted my work now, I might not get through.
Well, let's talk about your work. Give us an example of the kind of stuff you've been doing over the
Okay,
years.
well, look, my specialty has always been documentaries and documentary series, and I love working in the real world with real people, and I have shot so many different series, 4 or 5-part series. Every year for the last 25 years, I've shot a 4 or 5-part series about humanity, about the populating of the Pacific, the origins of the human species, the Trans-Siberian Railway, the Chinese People's Liberation Army, endless numbers of amazing topics. And I will spend up to 4 or 5 months of a year shooting one series based in Australia, but travelling to various parts of the world. And up until now, I've actually shot documentaries in 78 different countries. That's just not visiting the airport.
Yeah.
That's actually getting the camera out and spending time there shooting 78 different countries. So it's I mean, this is the world of documentary making. It just immerses you in the world.
And for these pieces of work, are you there as the cinematographer working to a crew, or are these projects that you have actually kicked off because it's something that interests you?
No. These are not projects that I kick off. I'm just hired as a freelance cinematographer.
But you've become known for doing that kind of work, and so you...
Yeah, well, a lot of the work I do is co-production work. It has been over the years. Co-production work is usually very well funded because the funds come from the United States, say arts, what's it called? A&E? A&E?
Arts, the Arts and Entertainment Channel?
Arts and Entertainment,
Oh, yeah.
The BBC,
Right.
Canal Plus in France, so and the ABC in Australia typically, or the Film Australia,
Yeah.
and so all the funds come together. So there's usually very good budget. So I generally work on co-production work, and the production could be based in England, but the photography will be based out of Australia, and editing might be done in France. So it's a true co-production.
Yeah.
Well, it's
So
excellent that it gives you enough money to be able to get somewhere other than the airport.
what's one of the ones in particular, say, that you have fond memories of that was a really good one to work on?
Well, I enjoyed shooting a series called The Red Express, which was a series. It was just a series about the Trans-Siberian Railway. We travelled from Berlin to Beijing by rail over a period of 6 months. I mean, the train trip itself only took 2 weeks, but you know what the film process is like. We went to all these different cities. So it's the story of the Chinese, the Trans-Siberian Railway as it rattles across what was then the Soviet Union at a time of change. We're talking in the early 90s now, just before the wall came down in Berlin.
What was it like filming in the Soviet Union, getting permissions and all the rest?
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of work has to be done by people in the office, making phone calls, getting visas.
So you didn't have any dramas on the ground, you know, everyone knew why you were there? And
I was arrested. I was arrested for filming in a Stalin camp where we were not supposed to be filmed. We were picked up and taken away for...
Well, speaking of camps...
You were not supposed to be filming.
No, we
Not
got caught
supposed to be.
filming in the wrong place. It was the right
You
time.
don't have permission to be here.
Yeah.
Oh, God. And well, most recently you've done a similar kind of trip. Tell us a little bit about your most recent project.
I've been working this year mainly in Europe, and I've just come back from working in Israel, and Poland. I'm working on a very special project. It's not something I can actually discuss.
Can't talk about it yet?
No,
Okay.
it's a very...
Ooh, love those projects.
Yeah. Anyway, it took us to Poland. It's to do with the Holocaust, and it's a very personal story by a person who actually started off as a student of mine, and we developed into a friendship, and I'm ending up shooting a lot of the material for him all around the world. So we're travelling.
Okay, let me talk about your teaching, because you have taught here at CIFA on occasion, and you run private one-on-ones and workshops and classes and things like that. So what are they about?
Well, I run a lot of... when I'm not shooting, I'm running workshops. and masterclasses. I do a lot of talking at industry functions. I do. I travel. One of my little gigs, which I hate discussing, but I have to tell you, it's working on beautiful cruise ships, talking about my work and screening my work and talking to passengers. So it's beautiful
What a
work.
great gig.
Great for the
It
ego.
is, yeah.
All that food on the buffet.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always an upside.
It is, and it's anyway. It's a great job. It's
And
a
you
lovely
do
job.
a lot of workshops. And we've got one here, a DSLR camera. This is the 5D Mark III.
Yes.
So a lot of these are based around these DSLR type cameras, yeah?
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of interest in DSLRs. There always has been. Well, there has been since 2008 when the 5D Mark II hit the streets. So a lot of people, their first video camera these days is a DSLR. It's funny when they ring up and they say, you know, look, I'd really like to learn to shoot video. And I say, that's great. What sort of camera do you have? And they say, well, it's a Mark II, 5D Mark II, as if
like that was obvious.
as if it's a video camera. I say, well, that's not a video camera, it's a stills camera. It shoots a bit of video. You
So
know.
the question, why is this one so popular? What is it about this, out of all the range of cameras that Canon makes, why this one?
Large sensor.
More than the others? Or the others don't have that?
Yeah, this is a huge sensor, 24 by 36 millimetre. It's a full 35 mil sensor. With that comes incredibly shallow depth of field, wafer thin.
Which can be a problem
wafer thin
sometimes.
depth of field, as you say.
Yeah.
And this is people have fallen in love with shallow depth of field all over again. I say all over again because remember when we used to shoot on film, we used to shoot large. We had a large sensor. It was called film.
It was called film, yes. There was no sensor.
And it
sensor
was
as
it was a
such.
large sensor. So
Yeah.
with a large sensor comes shallow depth of field. It's just the way lenses and targets or sensors work.
Particularly if you've got the iris open. because
Particularly if
you
you've
haven't
got the
light,
iris, yeah, and particularly if you've got the lens cap off.
Which always helps.
Yeah. So the thing is that when we shot film, 35mm film, we as cinematographers could tell our stories by using focus as a tool, as a way of showing our audience what was important in the scene. Where to look on a big screen. Where do you look? You look at where it's in focus, and you can use focus as a very creative tool. So we had all that. We had that for years. We had that since 1920, right? Then when digital got quite serious and moved out of the analog phase and into digital video in the mid-90s, all the sensors on these cameras were tiny. Like, I mean, they were about the size of my fingernail, right?
Yeah.
So we lost shallow depth of field because with small sensors we get infinite depth of field. You know, the crap on the front of the lens to the horizon.
And the extreme of that would be like, say, the iPhone, which has a very small sensor and no depth of field, and it's still high definition, but it's just got no depth of field.
And that's become the video look. Everything's in focus. It's a very flat image.
Yeah, well, the thing was that with the point I was making here, Phil, if you just let me finish.
Yes, Pete. What?
Jumping in like that. The point I was trying to make was that with these small sensors, we had so much in focus. Up on a large plasma screen, you saw everything. On a wide shot, you just didn't know where to look. So we, as cinematographers, it was very frustrating telling stories, but we had to use digital because people wanted to embrace this new digital technology. But we had such small sensors, such deep, unlimited depth of field that it was so much in focus on the screen. We could not use focus as a way of directing attention and adding some sort of subtleties to the stories.
But that's changed now. We've gradually got to the point where the sensors are big enough, as you say, they're 35mm size. They're the same as the film was, effectively.
Yeah, and that's where the 5D Mark II in 2008. This is where it kicked in. It was probably the first camera that came to us with such a large sensor that was able to record and actually record on a very small compact flash card all that data that was generated by this large sensor. But as we know, well, it's all heavily it's downsampled. It's line skipping. There's H.264 compression. A lot of mumbo jumbo goes on, but the image despite all this stuff, the image is still absolutely amazing. I mean, you scratch the surface and there's not a lot there, but if you, it's sort of, you know, it's a JPEG world.
Yeah, it's
Well,
heavily
but,
compressed and the shutter speed.
But as we've discussed in a couple of episodes of this program, there are a number of people who are hacking into the software, jailbreaking it, and then coming up with their own tweaks to improve the quality of the images that can be derived from the sensor.
That's right.
Yeah, so you can get raw out of the sensor now if you've got the right hack.
You can.
But this is like, for a cinematographer, is this the camera you would normally use for every project, or you choose the camera for the job? What other cameras might you use?
I try not to use a DSLR if I can help it. I find it it's a stills camera. It shoots great video, but it's a very, very awkward camera to use.
Yeah.
The pictures are extraordinary. I mean, you know, it should not be as good. There's no way it should be as good as it is. But it is out of the box. It's amazing. I mean, you're shooting 25p. You've got extremely wafer thin.
Wafer thin.
It didn't get any better, did it?
No, it did not.
Yours is much
No, thank you very much. Yeah.
What?
Would you say it was wafer thin?
I would say it was wafer thin.
Okay.
Oh, God, I've got
We're
tons
running
of
a
ideas
separate
now.
class later on.
Anyway, so
But it has issues with focus, and because of that wafer thinness, you know, adding a follow focus to this, it's a stills camera, as you say. It's not really designed for video production.
But you've got the body. You can still put some, cinema type lens on that. You have all the controls that everybody's used to.
everyone's done that.
Does that make it a cinema camera?
It turns it into a cinema camera at a low price point. That's the point. I mean, if this camera did nothing at all, and it did a lot, but if it did nothing, the one thing that it did was it spurned a whole generation now of large sensor cameras that are much ergonomically easier for people to use in a video, like, you know, some of the C300 from Canon, C500, C100, the Sony F55s, the F3s, all these cameras. Maybe they wouldn't have come around so early, I don't think, if people didn't get used to that look.
And even the new Blackmagic camera, which is a full-size sensor as well. And a very different shape and ergonomic.
That's right.
Well, the Blackmagic camera strikes me as, I guess, not a cinematographer. It just strikes me as a camera that its body shape is sort of a little bit like that, but not really.
Yeah, yeah.
How does it perform as a cinema camera?
Look, you asked me what I think about this camera, and I think I have probably given you my honest opinion. I think it is amazing. However, to me, it is, and it will always be a fantastic stills camera, right? But I've moved beyond the build your own camera mentality, and that's what the Blackmagic camera is. You basically get a sensor in a box, and then you have to build your own camera around it. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to buy a camera that I pick up out of the box, and it's got everything built in. Everything's modular, everything clicks in. I don't have cables hanging off everywhere. I don't have drives hanging off things up here. It's just designed to do the job.
So what usually is your camera of choice then?
The camera of choice, I love the Canon C300. I've been working on that mostly this year. I love the new Sony F55, which I've been mucking around with this year. That's a beautiful modular camera. These are expensive. I mean, the F55 is, I don't know, what, $30,000. But $30,000 for a camera. My first Arriflex SR2 Super 16 camera cost me, with lenses, with one lens, 3 magazines, 3 batteries, $186,000.
Wow.
And I was like 28 years old, and I didn't even own a house.
And you didn't own a house because you bought a camera.
That's right, yeah. So,
and one doesn't have to buy these, of course. You can hire them, if you're doing your job.
Yeah, but the point is, the thing that became so appealing about DSLRs is that for $4,500, you could just, you could just pull it out of the box and just get fantastic results. People, when they bought this camera, they would try the video out. They just plug the HDMI into here, plug it into their telly, and when they saw it, they were thinking, this can't be right. There's something weird going on here. It cannot be. The picture can't be quite this good, but it was. So, getting back to your question about workshops, a lot of people have stories to tell. But their first video camera is something like a 5D Mark II or 5D Mark III or a Canon a Nikon D4, D800.
Do you think this is a good camera for people to start on? All that quality aside,
Yeah.
is it actually a good one for people to learn video on?
And Phil, are you talking about this camera or this
Well, a
style of camera?
DSLR style camera, yes. Usually it's this model. Yeah.
Look, I think if you're starting, you need to get out shooting, and a camera like this enables you to go out and shoot. You can actually get the camera and go and do something, come back and look at it, evaluate it. It's a baptism of fire for most people because of the shallow depth of field.
Yeah.
Focus is just such a bugger of a thing, especially when you're working handheld. The lenses on this camera were never designed to shoot video. That doesn't mean they're not sharp. It just simply means that they were never meant to be zooming while the camera was still recording. So focus drops out. They're actually quite slow. There's no, the increments of focus are huge, which means the focus travel is minimal. So there's no way of setting focus distances. So I always figure if people can come up with a fantastic result on a camera like this, just imagine what it'd be like if they had a camera that was actually easy to use.
Well, what is an easy-to-use camera? I know you were very on
Yeah.
to the Alexa, for example, when that first came out.
Yeah. Well, Alexa is very popular with cinematographers because it goes back to the simplicity of the SRs and the beautiful other Araflex 16 35mm cameras with just bulletproof German technology. Or just hardware. They just look
And
lovely.
a really simple,
Very
well-built-
simple. It's a very simple little interface on the side, and I think that's what people love, the simplicity. That it is still very difficult, even with with this camera. You can spend a lot of time looking through menus trying to find one simple little thing. And I've been using this camera for years, and when people say, "Oh, I need to do this," I still can't find it.
There is no knob for that.
No.
Well, let me ask
no.
you. You've mentioned a few higher-end models. What about things like the Reds, the Red One, the Epics, all of those?
Yeah,
Because they
yeah.
can get quite complex.
They can. Yeah.
With the infrastructure that those sort of cameras need. Have you used much of those?
I've used the Red. I've used most of the cameras that are out there because that's the interesting thing about the way it works today for cinematographers. Like, I remember there used to be, when you were as a freelancer, you'd have producers ringing you up, and they would say, we're going to shoot this, we're going to shoot that, and they would assume that they would use your camera system, whatever it was.
You bring your gear along.
Yeah. But these days, when producers ring you up, they say, we're shooting this on Thursday and Friday, and by the way, we're using the Red. Or by the way, we're using the Sony. By the way, we're using Alexa. It's not like, what camera do you like to use?
Don't consult with the cinematographer on what they thought would be the best camera for the
Could
job.
you imagine a stills photographer, a producer ringing up a stills photographer and saying, we've got a fashion shoot on Thursday. By the way, we're shooting Nikon.
But what does that do to your ability to deliver the right result? Because suddenly the client is telling you what piece of gear you're going to use, and the job suddenly becomes know everything about every piece of gear.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that in a practical sense?
It's a bit disheartening, really. I mean, I always thought that when I'm hired as a cinematographer, people would like to think, gee, Pieter should use the gear that he's very familiar with. He's probably spent a lot of money investing in this equipment, and he's fine-tuned it and tuned everything, the colours, and has all these lenses and matte boxes and stuff that fit on this camera. It just seems logical that they would ask to have that because that would be the best value for money.
So have you been on a job where they've given you the camera, where you're shooting on the Red or something, and you say, well, given the script and given the story, that's probably not the best camera to use, actually, for this particular job, but we're stuck with it now.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, look, the bottom line is that everyone has fallen in love with shallow depth of field. They love this. They love to tell stories where there's only little bits of the subject in focus, and this is a very romantic. It has an incredible way of portraying a story. So that's why the 5D is so popular, and that's why all large sensor cine or motion picture cameras these days are back in fashion again. It's very difficult to convince anybody to shoot on a camera with a small sensor. They just sort of think it's...
Well, why would you? Yes.
Yeah.
In fact,
yeah.
we have a Pick My Brain question this week, which is very relevant for this discussion. So let's just go into that question now, if we could. Pick my brain.
If I was to buy one good lens, what would it be?
Yeah, very straightforward. If I was to
Yeah.
buy one good lens, what would it be?
Yeah, well,
And we don't know what camera he's talking about there, so let's assume a DSLR for the moment, let's say.
yeah, okay. Well, what's interesting about his question is if I can just, without
Yeah.
rabbiting on too
Yeah.
much, is that another thing that the 5D and DSLRs have done is it has given people an interest in lenses all over again. Now, when I was coming up through my news and current affairs days, we had zoom lenses, and you just put it up to your eye. You never knew where you were on the zoom. You never knew it was 50 mil, 40 mil. You just framed the shot.
Yeah.
But people don't zoom anymore. That's, if there's one other good thing that comes from DSLRs, is the fact that people don't zoom. Because you can't. They're not designed to. That's awkward. They bump around. They drop focus. So no one zooms.
As opposed to using the buttons on a TV camera.
Yeah. It's all manual, and it's very. It's not smooth, and it looks really naff. It looks really naff, and most people don't do it because it's just too hard.
Well, all right. So if we go then to that question, the lens you've got here, this is a 4:1. It's a 24 to 105.
Yeah.
So what is 1:1 on this lens with that size sensor? Would it be? Is it 50 mil or is it some other setting on this lens?
This lens is 1:1.
Right.
Yeah.
But we used to say on 35 mil film, a 50 millimeter lens would give you the same. Would give you 1:1. It wouldn't be wide or telephoto.
Oh, okay.
Right.
You mean what was the human eye? See?
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
yeah. So because anything above 50 was telephoto, and anything below
yeah.
that was wide angle.
Okay.
So on this particular lens, what would you regard as the actually what you're seeing point?
I'd say about 50 mil.
About 50. Okay.
Yeah,
So this gives you something that goes from vaguely wide to vaguely telephoto. Is that
Yeah.
enough for somebody who's buying one lens?
Look, if it's a DSLR, if the question was about which lens, which is my favourite lens to use on a DSLR, it's the one that we have on this camera right now, and it's one we just
So the
discussed.
24 to 105.
Yeah, because it's stabilised.
Yes.
It's not particularly fast, but we have ISO up our sleeve. We can tinker with ISO with the speed without going to losing too much quality. It's actually a very, very handy range, especially for documentary work. It's compact. So I would say the 24 to 105 as a general workhorse. But if I really wanted to have one lens that I would love to have on this camera, it would be the Canon 85 1.2.
Right.
Which is a beautiful, absolutely beautiful lens.
So that's a fixed focus lens, a prime lens.
Fixed focal length.
Yeah,
right,
and 1.2, so lots of light coming through it.
Lots of light coming through, and beautifully built, and it's actually a quite nice focal length for shooting interviews, portraits. It's a very handy lens, but it's certainly not a wide angle lens.
Now, if the question was about, let's say he was going to buy the new Blackmagic camera, which does not come with a lens.
Yeah. It doesn't come with a viewfinder either.
Well,
in fact, it doesn't come with anything.
So let's say we're going to add a lens to that kind of camera.
Yeah.
And I know you haven't used it a lot, but would you recommend the same lens? It doesn't matter what camera you attach these lenses to. It's a good lens is a good lens. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, to be quite honest, if I was spending $3,000, how much is it? 2,900.
The new version is 4,000. The 4K
Okay.
Blackmagic camera, about 4,000. Yeah.
Look, I would be saying and I think the questioner's question is a good one. You know how I mentioned how there's interest in lenses now. The reason why people are buying lenses is because lenses you can buy a great lens and use it on so many different cameras. The body changes. I mean, the Blackmagic body will be something else next year, but you still have the lens. I would say if you're going to spend $3,400 on a camera, which is absolutely bugger all, right? Put your money into glass, put your money into lenses, and snap it on the next model that comes out. Think of the back end of think of the camera as being software. Think of the lens as being your investment. So I would say to the questioner, spend money on glass. That's what a lot of people are doing these days, and they just upgrade the cameras from time to time.
And zoom lens, prime lenses. If you can only afford one lens.
Yeah, well, zoom lenses in these large format cameras come in the form of PL mounts, which are very, very expensive, and hence extremely large lenses that cost a minimum $20,000-$30,000. They're out of the question. So maybe I would be putting it into top quality primes, if possible. Go with primes. You don't need to zoom. You don't need to zoom. You can always just get a cheap zoom if you want to do a bit of a zoomy.
Right.
But I would put my money into beautiful prime lenses or some lovely little short zooms.
All right, terrific. We've got to wrap it up there, but thank you very much, Peter, for
you're
joining
welcome.
us. That went so fast, I wish we could talk for another hour, to be honest. I might have to get you back again. Where can people
Pleasure.
contact you if they want to try one of your workshops?
Okay. Is it coming up on the screen?
Yes, we'll get that lower set up. So we've got your website
We're very
there.
technical here at A Girl and a Gun.
There we are. PeterDeVries.com.au.
Yeah, so I run workshops, as you were saying. I never did get to do this plug. I probably run out of time.
Let's do it now, quickly.
Okay. So I run workshops in cinematography and lighting.
There we are. There's your
there you
site.
go. And actually, I run them in Sydney, but all over the place. But for anyone, all age groups. But next Thursday, the 13th of June, 13th of June. Next Thursday, 13th of June, I'm doing a very special talk in the Apple Store in Sydney, in George Street. This is part of the Sydney Film Festival and is actually organised through the ACS.
Right.
I did one last year. It was very, very successful. The store just goes nuts. And that's even before I get there. It's always nuts there, isn't it, if you remember rightly?
Yeah, certainly
So I'm doing a lighting, I'm going to be showing you the latest stuff in lighting. I've got some great lights to show. I'm going to be just giving people a very quick overview on how you can do a very, very simple lighting setup without mortgaging the house. That's the kind of...
So that's June
the 13th.
June 13th, if you haven't missed it already, coming up in about a week from now. Is that right?
Yeah, 6 o'clock, Apple Store. It's shopping night and it's during the film festival. It's all to do with the with the film. There's lots of talks on at the Apple Store.
And this would be presumably focused on focused, I can use that term, on how to get the best out of your iThingy.
Yes. What's an iThingy?
iPhones. And
okay.
Because being in the Apple Store, I guess.
iThingy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Very astute.
And that's a whole other discussion, which I'm not going to go into right now. Thank you so much for joining us, Peter.
You're welcome.
As always, you can reach us at agirlandagun.tv. That's our website. Facebook, A Girl and a Gun. You can tweet us at A Girl and a Gun. Just look for the name and you'll find us, A Girl and a Gun podcast. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, Phil. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, and next week, hopefully, John's going to be in the US, but hopefully he'll be able to join us via Skype. Let's see if that experiment
Very exciting,
works.
actually.
Yes.
It'll either work or it won't.
It'll either work or I'll be sitting here on my own. But for now, thanks for joining us. That's a wrap.
All you need to make a movie is a girl and a gun. Come along and join the party while we stare at the sun.
Little thin one. The f off, I'm full. Oh, son.
They found the second half.
It's only a wafer thin. Yeah, I couldn't eat another thing. I'm absolutely stuffed. Bugger horse. Just one.
Yeah.
Oh, just one. Just the one.